And welcome back to the Working Week. It is Car Con Carne, sponsored by C&H Financial Services. Business owners, that's you, the independent business owner, wondering how to proceed, how to move forward in this new world we're in. C&H Financial Services is here to help. They offer a variety of products, ranging from traditional merchant accounts to a zero-cost payment processing solution, which eliminates the expense associated with accepting Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express as a form of customer payment. C&H Financial Services eTab solutions, easy to set up for your business for online ordering and curbside pickup. C&H also offers cost-effective commercial lending programs, which can help get your business the money it needs to make it through these unprecedented times. To learn more, contact C&H Financial Services, 855-600-2437, or go to chfs.us. My guest tonight, he is a writer, he is an author, he is a horror aficionado. He's also a Canadian. He's from Nova Scotia. He is Peter Counter. It's 2 hours later where you are right now, so thanks for staying up on a school night.
That's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, James.
You've got the Ouija board behind you as we speak. So, have you seen the movie Host?
I have seen the movie Host
on Shudder. It's the first thing I think of as we're on a Zoom call.
Yeah, I loved it. It's the scariest movie I've seen in a long time.
Right. I said the same thing.
It's only it's less than an hour long.
Which, from now on, I want every movie to be an hour.
But oh man, yeah, you can watch
I said
it
the same thing. It really is legitimately, yes, there are jump scares, but there are some really tense, all your hair raised moments as you're watching it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's God, at the beginning, I don't want to get too far into spoilers in this, because if you haven't seen Host on Shudder, just do it. You can get a free trial.
Exactly.
It's worth it. It made me scared of the dark the night after I watched it.
It made me scared of Zoom calls.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm like, what's going on right now? I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out alive right now.
But how brilliant. We were talking just before we went live, and I want to talk about your excellent new collection of essays that just came out. We were talking about how COVID has forced creative people to find new ways to navigate around, to practice their craft, try to do what they do. This movie in particular, Host on Shudder, such a great example, conceived everything during lockdown, during this pandemic crisis. This story couldn't have been told in February. It wouldn't have made any sense to anybody. And it was filmed at all these actors, different locations. They never actually interacted in the filming of this in person. And the whole thing takes place on a Zoom call. It's brilliant. And like you said, it's the scariest movie I've seen in a while.
It was also really cathartic, I found, because it came out pretty early on in the pandemic. Of course, at the time, we thought it was pretty late.
Yeah,
in the pandemic, we didn't really realize. But
this is going to be so passé. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was the first thing I'd seen that probably that anybody saw that actually was set during the pandemic. And there are a few moments where I was like, oh, it feels so good to see my experience right now reflected back at me, even if it's a way, and they're having a worse time. So it made me feel good about my life.
So your new collection is Be Scared of Everything. It is a collection of essays where it's an interesting, almost like streams of consciousness. You weave in personal accounts and tie them back to horror and vice versa. I guess I'll let you give your own elevator pitch on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a collection of 29 essays on horror in culture and society and just my own life. I kind of call it hybrid nonfiction. So it combines criticism, because my background is I'm a TV and video game critic. And then it combines that with, also film criticism and then personal narrative memoir. And so it examines Ouija boards, UFOs, Blink-182, the occult, Led Zeppelin, haunted houses, sleep paralysis, you name it, cannibalism, I think twice, zombies. And through that, I guess I try to compose it. I think I read a lot of essay collections, like we were talking about before we went live. And I think of essay collections, good ones, as albums, so I tried to make each essay like sort of its own track that you could have on its own. But if you read it all in order, it would sort of speak to itself, sort of like a classic rock album. I don't know how many albums are composed as albums now.
Not enough, but I think that is a legitimate art form. Bands who really consider the sequencing and
Oh yeah.
the sum of the parts. And this is reason number 9,000,000 why I knew I wanted to talk to you beyond your writing style. I just got a sense that you liked all the same nerdy stuff that I like. So feeling good about this. So Halloween Saturday, is this go time for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're lucky we can still have trick-or-treating and stuff this
Right.
out here. But yeah, that's going to be the official launch of the book. The day before we're talking about host, I'm participating in a literary event that is an online seance with an actual medium, which
Oh
is
my God.
exactly host.
It'll go
There's
great.
going to be
No problem.
there's going to be other authors on the call, and we're going to do like automatic writing together. So that'll be fun, and that's all for charity for a Toronto Crisis Center. But yeah,
It's super cool.
so yeah, this is a big time for me. But it's funny because I love Halloween because everybody else is doing horror right now. But as you know, I just spent 2.5 years writing this book. Every day has been Halloween for me for a little while.
I think it's really cute when people say, yeah, I'm doing 31 days of horror movies in October. And I'm thinking, I'm trying to watch a couple horror movies a week. This 31 days, that's cute, but
yeah. I mean, like, there's so much that I have to catch up on. You know, it's like it's kind of you have so many gaps in your knowledge with such a deep genre, and so it's like when you get into it, you're like, oh man, I really have to watch the rest of Rob Zombie's catalog. You know,
you don't need to see the last one.
Fair enough.
Put the brakes on.
3 from Hell.
Yeah,
Just, I'll
you
stop
don't need
with
to
that
do
one.
that. You know, when people ask what is it that I like about horror, what is it? How can you watch scary movies? For me, it's always about the thrill, the adrenaline rush, the excitement. It's a terrific escape. To me, it's no different from getting on a roller coaster ride. And that thrill of climbing to the top, waiting for yourself to hit the precipice and then go hurtling down. I like that feeling. I also like, I think watching really dark shit keeps me balanced in real life. You mentioned cannibalism. I feel that way about watching Green Inferno. I can watch that and feel more centered when I walk away.
Mhm.
You have such a better way of describing what horror is and how it connects with people. I'm going to basically audiobook you here.
Well,
The best horror stories don't take us into the truly unknown. Instead, they show us the limits of sensory experience, making us aware of the border between humanity and naught, so we can better appreciate our toil, anguish, and frailty. Like life, horror begins with oblivion, is animated by human resistance to that terrible lifelessness, and finally urges us to accept death as inevitable. So much better said. And that's it. I mean, that's a wonderful way, a very literary way to describe what it is that connects us to this kind of content.
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's that's. I feel like there's nothing more emotionally honest in terms of like if you're looking at genres than horror, and it's exactly why, as I explained it in that's the second essay, Celebration of Life, which self-explanatory, I think. But like you said, you know, there's the roller coaster effect of you're going up that hill and you can't wait to go over, and there's a manufactured fear when you're on a thrill ride like a roller coaster that, hey, oh my god, you know, I'm doing something dangerous. But you're not doing that because you're like, I can't wait to almost die. You're doing it to feel alive, right? And that's what we do with horror all the time too. You know, people focus on the morbidity, and that's all there, but you know, it's not just pictures of corpses the entire time. There's always somebody trying to live. You know, that's the point of the horror story, is to not die, and then you accept it because we all die.
Well, and along those lines, you talk about the Alien movies, which you describe as optimistic. And I guess I'd never really thought deeply about the Alien franchise as you have. But these are inherently optimistic movies by your estimation.
Yeah. I mean, they're very human, I think. You know, it's so hard to find a franchise in any genre, I think, where the human characters are primarily putting aside all of their differences to not die, and the only times that violence is enacted on the actual human characters is when people have been hijacked by corporate ideology. So that you've got characters like Burke in Aliens, or or I guess the bad androids like Ash in the first one, Ian Holm. I'm sorry, spoilers. A lot of people are telling me like,
come on, Alien came out what, 1979?
Yeah. Well, all of those new babies out there.
It's a little.
Go watch it.
One topic or name that comes up a lot in this collection is H.P. Lovecraft, and I will totally cop to not having read much of his stuff. I'm aware of his pervasive influence. You talk about Metallica and Cthulhu, or is it Cthulhu? What is it about Lovecraft?
Well, I think that he, more than anybody else, at least before him, who was getting published at least, was able to really get to the pessimistic heart of horror, which is that there are just things that we are never going to be able to understand. He coined the ideas of, he coined the phrase "fear of the unknown." It's the greatest fear of all, is what we don't understand. And so I think that there's that, but there's also, I kind of touch on this in the book. I think that the reason that he's so popular is because he sort of had an open access philosophy with his work. So if anybody watching or listening is unfamiliar, H.P. Lovecraft had a whole bunch. He had a few novels, but he was mostly a short story writer and a prolific essayist. And he wrote all this very specific science fiction blended with horror called weird fiction. And it had all of these weird, strange gods that have had a great influence in heavy metal and literature, and TV shows like Stranger Things is very much based on H.P. Lovecraft. And back then in the 20s and 30s, his contemporaries would collaborate with them, and they would borrow his monsters. And I think that collaboration helped everybody sort of feel like, oh, H.P. Lovecraft, that's for us. It's kind of unfortunate considering he was such an atrocious human being with some seriously bad politics, but
there is that.
we're revising that away thanks to this open access idea. So
you mentioned metal. You talk about Zeppelin, which it's a rite of passage. Zeppelin 4 is certainly a rite of passage. And you talk about playing Stairway to Heaven backwards. I mean, I always loved, I'm perhaps a couple years older than you. I loved the mythology of rock and roll, the mythology of heavy metal. That's all been kind of lain to waste because of the internet, and we have access to every piece of arcane data ever created around a musician. But back then you thought, well, maybe there was some intent with Stairway to Heaven. Maybe they did mask that message about being in Satan's service or whatever it was. It's kind of fun to dig into that history.
It is. Yeah. I thought, you can find the backwards message on YouTube, and that's pretty easy to do. And it used to be easier in the middle time to hear the backwards message yourself, when you could actually download an MP3 or something like that. But now that everything's streaming, because for this book I tried to do it again, but I was like, I don't have the data to actually do this, so I had to set up a tape recorder outside of my computer speakers, and it was like I'd gone back in time, and the ritual of it kind of reignited that spark. I do think that, and I'm sure you probably feel this way as a fellow Zeppelin fan. I feel like Zeppelin has maintained that mythology better than most other bands, because they, Jimmy Page will talk about all of the mixing and stuff, but he doesn't talk about the legendary stuff. And right. I have rarely heard an interview with Robert Plant these days where he hasn't stormed out at the mention of Led Zeppelin. So
it's interesting. Zeppelin actually went as far as to create their own movie mythology with The Song Remains the Same, which is love the band. I can't watch the movie at all, but I mean, they went to great lengths to create their own like Lord of the Rings thing there. But I love the relationship that horror has with music, and Blink 182 is perhaps a bad example, but as tied to the UFO discussion in your book, you talk about Tom DeLonge and his thing for UFOs, and maybe he wasn't a crackpot all along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a pretty open, accepted knowledge. The government is talking about it now. Japan, just a few weeks ago, started their own government program that is openly investigating what's called, it's not UFOs anymore. They're trying to shed the stigma. They're calling them unidentified aerial phenomena. So, or like UAPs, I guess, or WAPs. I don't know.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah, don't.
Or it's a good idea.
WAPs.
I don't know.
But yeah, there was a front page story in the New York Times. I think it was 2016 or 2017, where a former Pentagon official was essentially, he like came out and was like, look, there are these things that we don't understand what they are, and they are threats. And then he quit. His name was Louis Elizondo. He quit his job at the Pentagon to join Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is an organization that is all about trying to research these phenomena.
It's amazing. If you're just joining us on Facebook, or if you just somehow fast forwarded the audio episode, this is Peter Counter. He is the author of Be Scared of Everything, a collection of horror related essays. One of the parts or the essays or concepts in this book that I related to most is laughing during horror movies. That nervous laugh, because you mentioned Midsummer. I'm wearing a Midsummer shirt. You mentioned the cliff sequence in Midsummer. I saw that movie in theaters. Do you say Midsummer or Midsommar?
I call it Midsummer. Yeah,
I do too. I have a friend who calls it Midsommar, and to me, that's like someone from Chicago saying, "I'd like to order a croissant." Just say croissant. Can you just?
Yeah, or like people who like say Barcelona, and you're like, yeah, that's not your accent.
Let's just go with the local dialect. So yeah. Midsummer, I saw it in the theater, and it was one of those scenes, the cliff sequence in particular. I had that nervous laugh, that reaction. And I remember laughing out loud, like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm watching this. This is so over the top brutal. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that reaction, that laughing at horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a huge, that I talk about that scene particularly because I was not the only person in the theater who was laughing at that point, because when just the special effects, it doesn't cut away where other movies might. And so you see like exposed eyeballs and skin just hanging off. And then the despairing screaming, and then there's a mallet, etc. And
they set it up beautifully. They showed the mallet beforehand. So there was a little foreshadowing. You're like, I wonder what that's for.
Can't be anything good. But yeah, I think that, in horror and comedy, they both have this in common, is that the stakes have to be high in order for you to care. And when the stakes get high enough, things get really, really absurd. And so a laugh and a scream, both of those are just cathartic reactions. I find when it comes to horror, laughter can give you some safe distance, because usually that's a sign that you're really, really invested, and your body's like, whoa, this is fake, right?
That's it.
And then there's always like things you can do, because it's not always just your midsummer cliff jumps. Sometimes there are things where things get so absurd that you can sort of give yourself some ironic distance. Like whenever I watch Saw, I try to think about Jigsaw going to Home Depot and trying to like get advice from a cashier on like how would you invert this bear trap, or like keeping his receipts to write them off on his taxes,
or just clean everything off. I only use this once.
Yeah, he's returning it. Yeah,
it's like the woman who buys a dress for a special event and tries to bring it back the next morning.
Exactly. Yeah,
do that with the bear trap. I mentioned at the beginning of our chat that you weave in a lot of personal experiences, and that's what I found so interesting. Is just you very deftly move around personal and observational and the critiques. I like that very much. The way you related a horrific experience on a vacation, a cruise, to Hannibal. I mean, that was I think, an especially gripping part of this book. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so some background. I don't have any apologies for spoiling my own essays. When I was 19, I was on a cruise vacation with my family, and we stopped in Costa Rica. And my dad and I went on a walk through town, and on a small pier, we were accosted at gunpoint, and my dad was shot in the chest, and I had to carry him back to the ship, and it was a very traumatic ordeal, and I unsurprisingly developed PTSD from that. And so yeah, it's a really alienating thing, having PTSD, because we don't have a lot of stories that reflect the post-traumatic experience. Generally, the trauma happens right before the ending, and then everything is over, and you assume that nothing else important happened to a person for the rest of their lives, unless you're watching like something with sequels and it keeps happening again, but they don't have lasting effects. So we tell our stories that center on trauma without consequence. I was 19 when this happened, and so I had this really difficult time understanding how all of the terrible symptoms of PTSD fit into what essentially I was seeing as the epilogue of my life. When I watched Hannibal, many years after that, I saw one of the most nuanced types of post-traumatic stories, and it really spoke to me. I was writing about it at the time. It was one of my first television criticism jobs, and so I really got to dive into it. And yeah, it's essentially yeah, I mean, that's sort of it. Is it really reflects it back. So much of the show is essentially subverting the CSI law enforcement procedural archetype, which is all about order, and it's essentially saying there is no order. There's only chaos and further chaos, and it really perfectly mirrors the emotional experience of learning to live sort of with this thing that will never go away.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly well written.
Thank you.
And my biggest complaint about the book is I finished it in like a night or two. I tore through it. So I finished it. I'm like, this is bullshit. Where's the rest of this? I want more. I want to keep reading. That's a compliment. Please take it as such.
I do. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, I would love to write another one. I could. But
you talk about found footage movies and the success of Blair Witch. I mean, that is something, I mean, I remember vividly. I went to, oh God, we're the same building, Piper's Alley. I went to see Blair Witch at Piper's Alley in Chicago over by North and Wells. Went with a friend of mine. It was during the daytime. We went to a matinee, and we walked out of there shell-shocked, because it was that time before the internet spoiled everything, when the internet kind of existed, but kind of wasn't what it was now.
yeah.
And there was that plausible, did that really happen? And this was the linchpin for all the found footage stuff that came afterward. You say it, that sort of hoax or marketing couldn't exist in the present day. You can't pass that stuff off as real anymore. But it is amazing to me how that genre, I mean, it's still going. I mean, case in point, Host, which we started talking about at the beginning of this podcast. I kind of love all that stuff, and it gets a bad rap, I think.
It does. I think that some people have difficulty suspending their disbelief when the camera has to have an excuse to be involved to show something, which is what makes Blair Witch Project so effective even now. If you were to rewatch it, is because they never take that extra leap where they're like, oh, we have to show a monster.
Right.
So there is that. But yeah, there are a lot of great found footage movies. There's a new one on Shudder, or it's not new, it's newly localized for for North America. It's a Japanese one called Noroi, the Curse, and it's quite excellent. It's a little bit of a comedy as well, but yeah, you're right. There's a little bit of a stigma, but for me, when I watch horror, I kind of want to be able to suspend my disbelief enough to be like, this is real, and they're doing the work for you with found footage, right?
There are a couple of sequences in the VHS movies I like very much. I enjoy that genre in general. All right, so the book, which I didn't even mention this, the book cover of Be Scared of Everything, it's gorgeous.
I have
Look at that.
here. Look at that. Hey.
Look at that. It looks like it should be a college textbook.
Shout out to my designer, Megan Fildes. She's the art director for Invisible Publishing. That's all her. She rules. Yeah, it's as good as it gets. That was practically the first thing that she showed me, and I was like, well, that's it.
Yeah, we're done here.
We're done. Yeah. And then she made it a little bit better. So
the book is Be Scared of Everything. You are Peter Counter. If you are a horror fan, this is pop culture. This is life. This is horror. It's a really enjoyable read. So I know I have a lot of fans. I've never said that phrase. I don't mean that. A lot of people who watch or listen. I come from the 90s where you can't say shit like that. It doesn't feel right. A lot of people who pay attention to Car Con Carne, who like horror and who are into that, you're going to love this book. Peter Counter, Be Scared of Everything. It is available at booksellers that you would expect to find it at.
Yeah, everywhere. Everywhere that sells books. And if they don't, they can order it for you.
When are you going to do the audiobook?
Oh God, I would do it yesterday. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. It's a Canadian independent publisher, and so we're a small team that's all working together. And I would love for that to happen. I want it to happen. So,
dude, you could do it in the room you're in right now. Set up a microphone to your computer. You just got to make sure the files are the right frequency and set it enough to Audible. You can do this.
Cool, I'll do it, and then I'll let you know.
I want to thank everyone who's been watching. Let's see, I got a couple comments here I wanted to read. Jimmy says, watched Host yesterday, thought it was very good. Agreed. Joe says, what up, guys? Great topic. Love horror movies. It is that time. So thank you. I want to thank Peter Counter for being our guest tonight. Thank you, everybody, for watching.